Good day, and welcome to the 576th in our series of Distinguished Speaker programs. I'm Harvey Bennett for the Economic Club of Florida. Former CIA Director and Defense Secretary Leon Panetta joins us this month. He's here to discuss the growing challenges and turmoil facing the United States from forces within and outside the federal government in what he's previously described as, quote, a crisis of leadership, unquote. His address to the club is fresh off his January 30th, 2024 testimony before the U.S. House of Representatives Select Committee on China. The hearing focused on China's support for U.S. adversaries. Now, here's Club Board member Raymond Bai with our formal introduction.
It's our pleasure today to have former Secretary Leon Panetta as our speaker today. Mr. Panetta, along with his wife Sylvia, founded the Institute for Public Affairs in California as an affiliate with California State University. He has served a distinguished career as a public servant, starting from service in the U.S. Congress, moving from there to working in the Office of Management and Budget as its director, appointed under President Clinton and President Obama as Chief of Staff, as OMB Director, as a CIA Director, and as Secretary of the Department of Defense. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Ash Williams, who's going to be the host for the talk today. Thank you very much.
First of all, there are few people who have given as much to public service as Leon Panetta. Let's take just a minute and try and understand a life of leadership. Over a distinguished career spanning 60 years, 6 decades, you've established a consistent pattern of substantive excellence, personal responsibility, willingness to serve, and being chosen for leadership roles with ascending gravity. This pattern repeats again and again in your life, from student body leadership at Monterey High School to graduating magna cum laude from Santa Clara University to service as a U.S. Army Intelligence Officer, an Army Commendation Medal winner, executive roles in state, federal, and city government, elections to the United States Congress in 1976, where you later chaired the Budget Committee and several other committees, leaving congressional service in early 1993 to serve as Director of the Office of Management and Budget. Lynn Robinson is with us today, former Director of Florida's Office of Management and Budget, and a distinguished expert in that field. Later, Chief of Staff through the 20th of January 1997 in the Clinton administration. And after the Clinton years, unlike so many with high-level public service in Washington, rather than pursue commercial opportunities, you founded the Panetta Institute for Public Policy in December of 1997. Then, as if you hadn't given enough to our country, in early 2009, President-elect Barack Obama nominated you to be Director of the Central Intelligence Agency. No small responsibility. And the Senate confirmed your appointment. In April 2011, President Obama nominated you to serve as Secretary of Defense, an even greater responsibility. And the Senate took a very unusual step, more unusual today than even then, with this unanimous confirmation. That reflects a life of trust earned and respect granted. So, there are obviously voices in your past that contributed to this extraordinary path of success and leadership, and there are choices. Help us understand your life of leadership. Talent and energy at this level of goal attainment are mere table stakes. Clearly, you had extraordinary insights and motivations. So whose voices do you listen to that help you understand the opportunities and risks that life has to offer? And what do they show?
Let me first of all pay tribute to everybody here at the Economic Club. I've had a long relationship with Florida, going back to Charlie Reed, who I think, Ash, you were close to. and Lawton Chiles, who was the Senate Chair of the Budget Committee at the time, all the way to Dante Fassel and Claude Pepper. A number of you may not remember those names, but it was a great delegation from Florida. So I'm really pleased to be with you and really enjoy groups like this that are willing to sit down and work together and listen to some of the issues that this country has to deal with. I guess probably the most important is that I'm the son of Italian immigrants. My parents came to this country like millions of others in the early 30s. I can remember asking my dad why he traveled all of that distance to come to a strange land, really. Even though they came from a poor area in Italy, they had the comfort of family and friends. And I never forgot my father's response, which was that my mother and he believed they could give their children a better life in this country. That, frankly, is the American dream, and I've had the opportunity really to live that dream. And my parents were obviously a huge influence in getting me to understand that I had to give something back to this country because of what the country gave my parents. My service in the military was really important because it was during a time when the draft was on, and I was dealing with people from across the country as a lieutenant, and the ability to have people from across the country work together on a common mission, know how to take the hill, that was really important to me to understand duty to country. And then lastly, of course, there was a young president who said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. All of that inspired me to get involved in public service. And throughout that, I've had models that have been very important to me. I first worked for a Republican senator from California, a guy named Tom Kegel. And I will never forget him bringing us into his office and saying to us, look, you're going to be tempted by a lot of people in this town who will try to influence you in order to influence me. But I want you to remember one thing. We're here because we serve the people of this country and the people of California. And another thing, remember when you get up in the morning, you have to look at yourself in the mirror. I never forgot that, because what he was saying is, in every job you have, you've got to exercise integrity. So those are some of the voices that made a difference in my life.
Thank you. And even with a life of accomplishment as extraordinary as yours, I'm guessing that, like most human beings, you're not without capacity to err. And you probably made a mistake or two, just a small number, in the past 60 some odd years. Are there any of those mistakes that proved to be important learning experiences, and what did you take away from them?
Well, you know, I've had obviously a number of positions and had a lot of responsibility in all the jobs that I've had. And, you know, one of the things I care about is defining what your goals are. And making sure that you have clear goals in whatever job you have, and not just move paper from the inbox to the outbox. And in doing that, I felt it was very important to be able to build a team that supported those goals and could work with you to achieve those goals. And I always said that I would be honest with them, and I expected them to be honest with me. And so, what I'm saying is that I cared about achieving the goals that I had established in whatever job I've had. And I have to tell you that when you're dealing with other people and sometimes other bureaucrats in the government, it can be a very frustrating experience. And so I probably found out that, you know, my worst character fault is because I really wanted people to do the job that they were responsible for. And so I tended to come down hard. When I went back to be director of the Office for Civil Rights, I think it was in my early 70s. And I took that job, understanding that I was going to do the very best in the job I was in. And if anybody gave me any trouble, the hell with them. I expected that I would continue to try to do the right thing. There was a DNI, Director of National Intelligence. And part of the problem with being Director of National Intelligence is that even though you're supposed to just coordinate that responsibility, most DNIs want operational authority. Well, they don't have operational authority, but they've always wanted it. And I had a person who was head of DNI who frankly wanted to take over the CIA and operate it. And he had sent out an order to CIA people that he was going to take over the authority of appointing station chiefs for the CIA. I immediately sent out an order to all of my CIA people and said, don't pay attention to what the DNI just told me. Well, as you can understand, those of you who worked in government, it was a step that a lot of even the people around me thought was fairly bold. But at the time, I was offended that he would do that. And ultimately went to the Vice President, the current President of the United States, and asked him to resolve the issue because the DNI had not followed procedures to come out with that order. I felt it was important to challenge that. Were there other ways to try to get that done? Perhaps. But because I felt that it was a direct threat to my authority as CIA director, I went right to the top. And fortunately, the Vice President found in my favor. And the DNI soon stepped down, and a guy named Jim Clapper became DNI and understood that that job was a coordinating role, not an operational role. And fortunately today, I think DNIs have learned what that role is all about. Anyway, I made a lot of mistakes throughout my 60 years of public life, but I can always say that the goals that I established to achieve, I was able to achieve working with a lot of important teams that work with me.
So I'll put a couple of things there. First of all, a strong respect for institutions and process, and honoring boundaries and respecting structures that are designed the way they're designed and function the way they function for very specific reasons in the federal government, separation of powers, particularly with the interface between the military and civilian leadership and the intelligence community occupying some vaporous area in between the two. Very important that people understand that, and thank you for that set of choices. I'm curious, talking about choices, you've done something that the vast majority of Americans have not done. You have not only spent a period of your life in public service, you've really spent your entire life in public service. I never heard anything in anything you said, and never read anything in preparing for this conversation that suggested you had ever done anything in life for personal economic gain or aggrandizement. Now, you're talking to the Economic Club of Florida. Even though this is a state capital and a university town, the vast majority of people in this room have spent their lives pursuing success and wealth in the private sector. You didn't do that. What went into that choice?
Well, I really felt it was important to give something back to the country. And frankly, what I'm trying to do here with the Panetta Institute is trying to develop a new generation of leaders for our country. And man, do we need a new and younger generation of leaders in this country. I want them to understand that they owe something back to this country. We have a duty to this country. The rewards in public service are not money or power or having a name on the door. The purpose of public service is to improve the lives of people in this country. And I felt that if I could help improve the lives of people in whatever job I had, that was the greatest reward I could ever have. And for example, when I was in Congress, I was able to establish a national marine sanctuary protecting the Monterey coastline. For those of you that know the Monterey area, we have one of the most attractive coastlines in California. And I wanted to protect it. And my ability to get that legislation passed and establish the sanctuary is something, that I always felt proud of, and that the community really loved and felt that no matter who their children were, their children, they would always be able to enjoy that coastline. So I thought that was important to do. And obviously, the one thing that I did as the director of the CIA was run the operation that got bin Lawton. I didn't get it because I got a bonus or a paycheck. I did it because I wanted to bring justice to an individual who had deliberately attacked our country and bring that individual to justice. And that was a rewarding experience to be able to do that. So I think the reward in public service is a reward that goes to the heart of what our democracy is all about, which is that all of us owe a duty to country. But by the way, one of the things that, and I'll be frank with all of you, one of the things I'm sensing in young people is that they don't have that same drive, that same sense of duty to country. That our recruitment levels are down now in the military, and that concerns me a great deal. I really think that looking to the future, what we really need to do with young people is establish a national service system that requires young people to serve this country in some capacity, whether it's in education or conservation or healthcare or the military, and give something back to the country. And in return, we could provide a GI Bill of benefits. It would be a hell of a lot better for them to pay for college working for this country than simply borrowing the money to go to college like they do now.
That's a great idea. I think that's an initiative. If there are any questions about the audio, I can't imagine why there would be, but if there are, you just got a resounding applause for that. So thank you. So that brings something to mind. One of the things about leadership is it's a franchise grant. You have to have somebody who's willing to lead, but in order for someone to lead, those who they would lead have to submit to the leadership. They have to respect the individual who's leading, the proposal that's being put forward for whatever it is they're being asked to embrace, and then enlist and execute on whatever's associated. What thoughts can you share about earning the respect for a leadership franchise that you have so successfully done over and over and over again from high school to the highest offices in this country?
Well, you're touching on something that I think is extremely important right now in our times. I often tell the students here at the Panetta Institute that in a democracy we govern either by leadership or by crisis. If leadership is there and willing to make the tough decisions associated with leadership. And mark my word, those of you in business, those of you who have been in public life understand that leadership requires taking risks, and it requires making tough decisions. And you're not going to please everybody if you make tough decisions. But what your responsibility is to do what is in the best interest of the country. And look, if that leadership is not there, then we're going to govern by crisis. And too often these days, we are governing by crisis. If you look at Washington, they're waiting constantly for crisis to happen in order to get anything done. And it's a hell of a way to govern, because there's a price to be paid. You start to lose the trust of the American people in our system of government. So what does it take to provide strong leadership? You've got to be willing to make tough decisions. You've got to be willing to step up and do what is right. You can't be afraid of offending parts of your base or people that may be offended by what you do, because your responsibility is to govern and to try to be able to do what's right for this country. And I'm afraid that these days we are not seeing enough of that leadership. And so the result is that we spend more time governing by crisis than we do by leadership.
Would agree. And to the point you made earlier about service, I would say there are some, and we all could think of examples in whatever parts of the country we may live in. There are some who are in pursuit of elected office or already in elected office who seem to in many ways use their roles as much for self-aggrandizement and promotion, if not more so, than actual service. And in fact, in some of these situations, I'm thinking of an individual or two who literally never passed bills. And rather than governing in the face of a crisis, they may, in some cases, cynically look to the creation of a crisis as an end in itself. The idea of, I'm here to blow it up. That's actually a marketable attribute for some people in elected office today, which is very contrary to the world that you and I grew up in. So the fact that you have focused on the greater good consistently throughout your life, without an eye to personal gain, is absolutely extraordinary and something we should all appreciate. When you think about the point you made about our young people and how they learn about things, how they perceive public service, public obligation, how they look at leadership versus simply being a follower, what guidance would you offer the parents, and in this room a lot of grandparents, who want to influence young people in the right directions and have them choose the higher road, perhaps the path less traveled, perhaps the more difficult path, but the better path? Well,
That's another area of concern that I'll share with you and all of your members. Our institute tries to inspire people to lives of public service. And so I deal with a lot of students, particularly from the CSU system, the California State University system, who come here for training. And I have to tell you, even though we live at a time when they're getting stuff off of the internet, off of social media, they learn an awful lot about a lot of things, but they don't learn that much about what our democracy is all about. And what I'm finding in these young people is that they really don't understand how democracy is supposed to work. Now, I'll talk about California. When I was a kid in California, I had to take history courses. I had to take courses in democracy. I can remember a course called Problems in Democracy. I had to take courses on the Constitution. I had to take courses on just exactly how government is supposed to operate. And frankly, in order to graduate, I had to pass a constitution test. Every student in California in those days used to have to pass a constitution test in order to graduate. That's no longer the case. So what I'm finding is young people don't really understand how a law is to be made. Now, that's understandable because there are members of Congress who don't understand how a law is to be made. But it's discouraging. And I really think, it's a combination of parents and the community understanding that we've got to do more to teach young children and our students about our democracy and also about civility, by the way. Because frankly, our system cannot work unless you're willing to listen to one another, unless you're willing to work with others, unless you're willing to find compromise and consensus. Democracy doesn't work unless you're willing to do that. But I think young people aren't there yet. And our objective really at the Institute is to try to give them a sense of what governing is all about. There's a course I teach at the Institute for law students where they come to the Panetta Institute, and what I tell them to do is I said, look, pick an issue, immigration, healthcare, foreign policy, whatever issue you want. Give me the Republican position on that issue. Give me the Democratic position on that issue, and then tell me what a possible consensus would look like. That, ladies and gentlemen, is called government. It's becoming a lost art. And somehow we have got to get young people to understand how that process works, because, look, if we don't build a good future generation of leaders, we'll continue to have problems with our democracy.
So very true. And I'm thinking if your parents, Carmelina and Carmelo Panetta, immigrant parents who did a great job raising a family and created a great American leader in the process, could see what's going on with immigration today and the utter lack of progress and the complete fiasco as a consequence, I think they would have the same reaction you're having, which is the only reaction any of us can have, which is shaking their head and saying, what's going on here? Why can't you guys put your heads together and figure this out and put policy in place that serves our country? So
let me just say, in the time that I've been in public service, I've seen Washington at its best and Washington at its worst. Right now, Washington is at its worst. When I was in Congress, Democrats and Republicans worked together, whether it was a Republican president or a Democratic president. During the Reagan administration, it was Democratic Congress. In the Reagan administration, we sat down and passed immigration reform, comprehensive immigration reform. Took us a while. I was part of the negotiation on that immigration bill. Republicans and Democrats sat down, worked through the issues, and we passed it with a bipartisan vote. Comprehensive immigration reform. We did the same thing on tax reform, and by the way, we did the same thing on Social Security reform at the third rail of politics. But we passed it on a bipartisan basis. And today, immigration, we know it's broken. We know we need comprehensive immigration reform. We finally have a deal worked out in the Senate. And God bless those members who are willing to sit down and do the hard work on that. And now, there are those that are saying, to hell with fixing immigration reform, we'd rather have an issue in November. That, in my book, is a violation of their oath of office to do what they should do to defend and protect our country.
I wouldn't disagree, and I'm guessing that the elixir that changes that toxic mindset rests with the electorate. Because at the end of the day, as long as maintaining a crisis as an end in itself, so that you can point to the crisis as an evil and blame it on somebody else for your own aggrandizement, it will continue. Only when voters put their foot down and say, that doesn't get it. I don't care what party you're in, this is a national problem, it requires a national solution, it's not a partisan thing, get it fixed. If you can't get it fixed, I'm going to vote for somebody who will. Is it that simple?
It's a question of putting country ahead of party. We all have our different views. I mean, God bless our forefathers. They understood that there would be different views. There would be a dialogue on all kinds of issues. But ultimately, they also understood that you have to solve problems. You've got to come together and work through problems. And the reason we elect people is to govern. It isn't to go back to Washington to pound your shoe on the table. Look, I have my youngest son. Sylvia and I are very proud that our youngest son is in Congress, and he's in my old seat in the Congress. Well, it's obviously a different time, but he was a veteran, won the Bronze Star in Afghanistan, and like other members, he didn't want to go back to Washington just to jump in a trench or pound his shoe on the table. He went back there to govern. And so, I mean, the one sign of hope in Washington is that there's this group called the Problem Solvers Caucus. I think there are 25 Democrats, 25 Republicans, who are trying to find bipartisan solutions to problems. Not easy. They don't, the leadership is angry at them for what they're doing. But the reality is that there are newer members who really do want to get back to governing. And that's the only way we're going to save our democracy.
So with the challenges we're seeing for our democracy here at home, let's shift to the global arena for a moment. The United States has been the global standard of independent thinking, democracy, freedom, sort of the traffic cop for the liberal democratic order. That's with a small d, meaning free and open seas and commerce and the ability of sovereigns and entities to do business with one another without fear of suppression or interference. That all appears to be threatened now. And the whole regime we've grown used to since the end of World War II is being challenged. We have China, Russia, and other authoritarian powers that have aggressively asserted their desire, will, and means to expand their territory by use of force as they feel appropriate. Other states and stateless political factions are aligning with them to further their own interests. Some would suggest that the United States might be better served by looking inward and serving only American priorities and withdrawing from the global stage. What might that look like, and what would the consequences be if America's global leadership is diminished?
Well, we begin by having to understand that we live in a dangerous world right now. There are more flashpoints in the world today as we speak than since World War II. Whether it's Russia and their aggression against the Ukraine and Putin, whether it's Xi and China and the potential aggression against Taiwan, whether it's North Korea, which is building up their nuclear stockpile and developing missiles that could be used not just against South Korea, but against the United States. Whether it's Iran, which continues to provide weapons and support to those who destabilize that region in the Middle East. Those are among some of the big challenges, and terrorism remains a real threat. And it demands leadership by the United States. I mean, those who are advocating that somehow we can return to isolationism the way we did before World War II, put our head in the sand, and not pay attention to these challenges are kidding themselves. They're kidding themselves. And just as those isolationists thought we could somehow separate ourselves from the war that was going on in Europe, they were wrong. And we ultimately had to fight a world war in order to protect our own national security. So I'm a believer in world leadership by the United States. And very frankly, if the United States doesn't provide that leadership, nobody else will. Nobody else will. Now, the key to dealing with these challenges is that we are going to have to build alliances to work with us. We can't solve every damn problem in the world, but we sure as hell can work with others to try to provide security. So I think the fact that we are working closely with NATO in trying to support Ukraine is very important. NATO is extremely important to protecting Europe. I think we need to build a strong alliance in the Pacific, working with South Korea, working with Japan, working with Australia, working with India, working with some of the ASEAN countries in the Pacific. We need to build a strong alliance that can confront Xi when Xi decides to become aggressive. We need the same thing in the Middle East. We need to build alliances with modern Arab countries, with Israel, and work together to deal with Iran and terrorism. And we need to do that in Latin and Central America and in Africa. But it takes leadership. It takes world leadership. And it's got to be bipartisan world leadership. This country can't turn our leadership in the world into a political issue. We've got to work together. Ultimately, I'm convinced that we can do that. I really think the American people understand that we have to be strong. We're the ones that are going to have to protect our security. We're not going to be able to rely on others. We have got to protect our security working with others. And so it is very important today that we understand how important world leadership is, because make no mistake about it, we live in a world where autocrats are confronting democracies. And those autocrats are working together. They're sharing weapons. They're sharing efforts to try to work together. And democracies need to understand that we have to work together as well if we're going to be able ultimately to save democracy in the 21st century.
And I think that implies two things. It implies working together to claim the moral high ground on doing what's right as a matter of policy for the good of humanity and democratic nations around the world. And that moral high ground has to be accompanied by the military high ground to back it up in terms of resources and forces. And in the support for our allies in hot wars in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe now, you could make a pretty darn good argument when we depleted a lot of U.S. inventories that seriously need to be replaced and refurbished. And that requires Congress to get its act in order and provide the resources. And I'm reminded of Teddy Roosevelt's comment early in the 20th century when he was building the first naval fleet that toured the world and asserted U.S. leadership through military gravitas with a great white fleet. And President Roosevelt said, "Speak softly, but carry a big stick." And what was the phrase? You will have a nice walk, or something to that effect. I'm concerned that our stick is shrinking, and if we don't maintain it, the moral high ground doesn't get quite the level of attention that it might from the bad guys. So I think we would agree that's important to handle.
Without question, it is extremely important. I mean, we are the strongest military power on the face of the earth right now, and we have to maintain that strength. I mean, if we're going to be a world leader, you can't do it unless you have the strongest military on the face of the earth. And these days, with new technologies being developed, with artificial intelligence, with robotics, with cyber, one of the areas we are really going to have to invest in more is developing cutting-edge technology for the military. This isn't, this is not the America of the 20th century. This is the America of the 21st century. And the other thing, we are going to have to make sure that young people understand that they have to provide service to this country. I mean, it is a shame when the Army did not meet its recruitment requirements and other parts of the military failed to meet their recruitment requirements. We depend on young men and women to serve this country in uniforms. And let me tell you, as Secretary of Defense, I visited war areas in Afghanistan and Iraq and elsewhere, and looked into their eyes, and these are young men and women who are willing to put their lives on the line in order to protect our country. And I sometimes wish that those who are elected to office in Washington had a little bit of that same courage in order to make the tough decisions necessary to govern.
Couldn't agree more. Let's wrap up on a positive note. We've established we have challenges, we have wood to chop, there are things that need to get dealt with, there's some areas where we're falling short. That said, the initiative, the work ethic, the freedom, the creativity of the American people has served us and pulled us out of a lot of ditches in our history. What is out there today that you think is something that we can find comfort in and see as a ray of hope for the future?
Look, I often have said to people that we're at a pivotal point where the United States can go in one of two directions. We could be an American Renaissance, or we could be an American decline. I honestly think we could be an American Renaissance. We have tremendous strength in our economy. We're innovative, we're creative. We can teach young people the skills they need for the 21st century. We can get back to a time when Republicans and Democrats are willing to work together in order to lead this country, and we can provide world leadership. I mean, I think all of that is very real, and that's the potential for the United States. We've been through crises throughout our history. Civil wars, world wars, recessions, depressions, natural disasters, but somehow we have always found the right leadership to get us through. And I think we can do it again. But if we don't, then we could be an American decline. We let our fears and our hates and our prejudices divide us, polarize us, then we'll go the way of past empires in history. Those empires died because they failed to provide the right leadership at a critical time. And we could wind up the same way. So we've got two paths we can follow. I honestly believe that we could be an American Renaissance.
Mr. Secretary. You shared words for us to remember and values for us to live by. Thank you very much, and I'm going to share with everybody. Secretary Panetta is being inducted into the California Hall of Fame. Very appropriately, I'm sure you all agree. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
You've been listening to former CIA Director and Defense Secretary Leon Panetta, Chairman of the Panetta Institute for Public Policy, speaking before the Economic Club of Florida on February 6, 2024. For more information on the Panetta Institute, visit panettainstitute.org. The Economic Club of Florida promotes interest and enlightenment on important economic, political, and social issues of the day. To learn more, including how to become a member, visit our website at economic-club.com. This program was recorded at the Florida State University Alumni Center in Tallahassee, Florida.